So today we're going to be talking about planning a problem solution essay. And so this is going to be very helpful for you for the essays that are actually coming up, both your trash research project and your My City problem solution essay. We're going to be diving into the specifics on what you need to do to prepare for this essay, as well as the actual writing of it. But the trash research project is called a project instead of just the essay, because there's so many different steps that are involved that you need to do before you even sit down to write the essay. So we're going to be kind of walking through those steps, and hopefully this will be really helpful for you to think about what's going to be needed for you when you actually sit down to write this essay. So let's start from the beginning. Problem solution essays are what they sound like. They're an essay that identifies a problem or issue and then argues a potential solution to the problem. So with a problem solution essay, you really need to understand the problem, because you're meant to go ahead and come up with a potential solution to the problem. So that's why there's a lot of kind of front heavy work that you're going to have to do before you can even, address a potential solution. Okay, so like I said, we have two essays that are coming up. We got that trashed research project, right? And that's the one that's going to require you to identify, a problematic trend in our trash habits. You're going to track your own trash, and then you're going to be proposing a solution to that problem using at least one library-based research source. And then after you've completed that, you'll be moving into your, kind of big research essay. And that one is going to be you finding a lot of sources from the El Camino Library and online and other places, and putting together like a 6-page essay. We're not going to be really talking about those specifics today, but I'm bringing it up because I want you to know that we're going to be working on things today that you're going to be able to apply to that essay as well. So just something to keep in mind, but you don't have to worry about that big research project just yet. Right now, we're working on this trash research project. Okay. So as you may already know, there's a few things that you are going to need to do with this project. You may have already tackled reading that book, Trashed, an Ode to the Crap Job of All Crap Jobs. And I don't know if you have, but you will be tracking your own trash for a week, and you're going to be filling out a sheet. You may have seen it on one of the modules. And then you're going to be writing a brief analysis. That's a 2-page essay. We're going to be talking about that in a moment. From there, you're going to be finding a problem in how we do or don't deal with trash. And you're also going to be researching to find a source along with your trashed source. And then finally, you're going to be writing that 4-page essay. Okay, so like I said, these steps are meant to kind of help you really feel comfortable with understanding the problem, so that you can come up with that solution. So on to your first kind of step beyond reading that book, which is analyzing your own trash habits. So, spring break might be a good time for you to kind of tackle this if you haven't yet, but you're meant to track everything you throw away for 7 days, anywhere you are. And the point of this is to kind of give you that experience of collecting data and evidence and thinking about the significance of that data, right? So the idea being that you're supposed to be analyzing your own trash habits, because then what you need to do is write a short essay where you're summarizing the results, discussing any problems you found in your own habits, and then finally suggesting a reasonable solution to that problem or problems. And then the work that you do on that short essay is then going to be incorporated into your experience in that larger trash research essay. So the work that you're doing now on analyzing your trash habits will be important to your actual essay. Okay, so specifically with this 2-page essay that you need to write, There's a specific layout to it. It's not just talking about, your habits and then kind of, I learned this lesson. There's a little bit more involved. And your professor broke it down pretty specifically on what he's looking for. With that introduction, you're going to be, telling the reader what you did, that you spent 7 days collecting all your trash, when you were at school, when you were at work, etc. You can even begin it with an anecdote. If you haven't done an anecdote before, it's typically going to be coming right at the top of your introduction. It's as your hook, where maybe you give a little brief story about something that happened, maybe where you were collecting the trash. It can be something funny, it can be something shocking, it could be something silly. The idea being that you're kind of grabbing your reader, wanting them to read more. And then finally, that introduction should be the main takeaway from the project, and kind of think about that as like your thesis for this little essay. And then from there, you're going to have 3 or 4 body paragraphs. And this is where you're going to be diving really into not just your experience, but this is your analysis element of your trash habits, right? So when you're writing it, you'll want to just reference the prompt. I won't go into all the specific possibilities that he wants you to talk about, but he gives quite a list here of different things that you could talk about. So, he says like predictions you made about the type and quantity of trash could be one of your paragraphs. What was difficult or problems that you faced during this experience. He says even like concerns about the accuracy of your results. Maybe it was like a week where you were throwing out a lot more trash than other weeks because maybe you were home a lot or something like that. And something like what surprised you or did not surprise you. So, you pick 3 or 4 of these different topics and dive into them in each of the body paragraphs because you're really kind of analyzing your own behaviors. Because then that's going to lead into your conclusion for this essay. And that's, what was significant? What do your findings mean? What's the larger message or meaning regarding your trash? What does it reveal maybe about you or about society? And then finally, he's looking for a brief solution proposal, something that you think could be potentially solvable for whatever the issue is that you have identified. So think about this as kind of a mini attempt of writing the larger essay that you're going to be doing, down the line. But this is just to kind of get your ideas flowing, get you're thinking about solutions to this trash issue. Okay, so then from there, finally, you're going to be moving on to the research. So now that you've identified a trash problem potentially, potentially something that you see in our own city, maybe it's mentioned in trash or something that you came up with in your trash diary. Now you're ready to move on to the research element. And this is potentially new for you if you haven't done research before, but you're going to be going into the El Camino Library and you're going to be finding at least one source, and don't do more than 3 sources, he says, that are going to help you kind of further identify the problem and maybe support your solution. So Professor Degnan gave a tutorial video on how to navigate the database. It's in the week 8 module. So I won't go into the library today during this workshop. But if you do find that you're going in there and you're not really sure or you're not comfortable with, what your results are showing, and it's not, working for you, reach out to me and, we can do it together kind of thing. Or if anyone wants to stay after this workshop, I'm happy to help you kind of navigate that. But I won't go into it now because there's already a tutorial in Canvas for you to view. And I would definitely recommend viewing that tutorial before you dive into the El Camino library database, because there are easier ways to search than you might realize. So I would recommend, watching that so you're not, struggling once you get in there. And then also when you're doing your research, remember that you need to be able to describe what the problem is, where you see it, and propose a solution to it. So you need to make sure that you're getting enough information from both your observation and your research to prove that it's a widespread problem. So you really need to think about the pieces that you're using, your sources. You might need to go through quite a few different sources before you find the one that's really working for your plan for your essay. And then just to note that he's pretty specific that he does not want you to do like general Google searching like that. You really need to do, you need to find a source, at least one from the El Camino Library. Okay, so now we've kind of talked about the things that are leading up to your actual essay. These are you kind of compiling all these elements, so then you're ready to dive into the essay writing part of it, which we're going to tackle next. But I want to pause before that to see if anyone has any questions about the things that you need to do before you even tackle the essay. So does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. All right. So let's move on to your actual essay writing. So like I said, you have the information from reading Trashed, you have the information from your own experiences and observations, and now you have the research that you've done at the El Camino Library. So now you're ready to actually write this problem solution essay, right? So with this type of essay, it's pretty straightforward, what's to be expected. But you're going to need that introduction. You're going to need a presentation of the problem. And then you're going to need a proposal of a solution to the problem. And that's going to include your description of the solution. And then also that rationale of why that solution is a good one. And then, of course, your conclusion. So he's pretty clear on what he's looking for in this essay. So let's get into the specifics. By now, you're probably pretty familiar what needs to go into an introduction, but it is important to think about your audience when you're writing an essay. And in this case, you're meant to write an essay for an audience that is not in this class and is not familiar with the project that you've set out to do. So really, you need to give the reader excuse me, some specific background. You want to give them a little bit of context about the issue that you're addressing. And you want them to understand, where you're coming from and your plan for the essay, right? So generally, your introduction is going to include that hook at the beginning to pull the reader in. And then it's going to be providing the reader with some context and some background of the issue. And finally, you're going to be closing it out with your thesis statement. And in this case, your thesis statement should be a very clear statement about what the trash problem is and what your solution to it is. And you, by the way, don't have to write your thesis statement in just one sentence. It can be more like 2 or 3 sentences. Typically the longer the essay, the more leniency there is with that. Some theses can be, 3 sentences, and that's still considered a valid thesis statement. Okay, so that's the introduction. Then we move on to the presentation of the problem, right? So this is where you're going to tell the reader what the problem that you've identified is. He says, this is a good spot to bring up the Trashed book. You're going to introduce the author. You're going to give the reader a little bit of context about what Trashed was about, and why it's relevant to the specific topic of your essay. And then you're also going to talk about what you found in your own trash diary, about your own experience, right? That's why he had you write that previous shorter 2-page essay, because now you're taking what you wrote in that and you're going to be applying it to this larger essay. So for this paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, there are a few questions that you can kind of go through when you're thinking about what you need to be including in this section. Right. So he says, what is trash? What do you see that was important and what's relevant? He describe and cite it, of course. What did you find in your trash diary? Explain how that's relevant here and what the problem seems to be. And then what did you find in your research that seems to show that others see this as an issue as well? right? And when you're doing that, make sure that you're setting up your source. So that means that you're providing the reader with the title of the source. If there's an author, provide that. A little bit of background about the source or the author, and telling the reader why this is relevant or important to your essay, and in telling the reader what the problem is. Okay, so those are things to think about when you're writing this section. From there, now we're moving into your solution to the problem. And there are going to be two different parts to the solution to the problem, right? The first part is going to be the description of the solution. So this is where you're going to tell the reader what you think can and should be done to solve the problem. So you're going to be start with what you might think would be a sensible solution, right? You're going to be researching that solution so that it's not just you saying that this is a good solution. You have another source or other sources who also agree with you about this being a good solution, right? So from there, you also want to think about what you wrote in your trash diary and the what you were reading in your articles and books, because you're going to be describing the solution and how it works. So you really need to understand the solution before you can turn around and write it for an audience, right? So that's why there's so much kind of front heavy work happening here, because you're the knowledgeable one now telling this reader, you know, this is a great solution here, which leads into the second part of your proposal of the solution of the problem. And that's the explanation of why it's a good solution, right? So once you've explained it to the reader, you know, you describe what the solution is, you've said other people agree with this too. Now your next paragraph or paragraphs is going to be diving into why this is actually usable, doable, and a good idea. So things that you could kind of explain to the reader would be like, would it save the city or people money, and how? Would it get rid of trash more effectively? How so? Would it be more environmentally friendly somehow? You could explain that. And is it simple to enact and get done, and explain how that would happen? And then finally, also important, do other smart people agree with you about the solution? So that's coming from that research you've done, where you found other people who also have proposed similar solutions, because that's going to strengthen your argument. And again, as always, remember that you're citing those sources and you're giving credit to those people who are also proposing this good idea. Okay, so those are those two elements of the solution to the problem. And then finally, you're going to end with your conclusion. And of course, this is where you bring everything together. And this is where you're kind of restating all the things you covered in the essay. You're reminding the reader what the trash problem is. You're talking about where we see it in LA. And then finally, you're talking about your solution. So you're kind of almost restating your thesis statement and what you've addressed in each paragraph. It can feel a little bit repetitive, but that kind of is the point to a conclusion. And then finally, you want kind of to end with that big picture kind of thing. So that's where you're going to kind of end with, like, where do we see, okay, where do you see it realistically going with this problem and solution? Like, do you really think that this could work? What needs to be done for that to happen? What are the stakes if we don't do it? You know, you want to kind of end with something that's saying, like, you know, if we don't do this, then, well, what's other solutions? You know, this could be the thing that fixes, you know, climate change, or something bold to end it all with, is kind of the point of the conclusion. And then you're done. So that's let me see, I think that's all I have. Yeah, so that covers basically all the elements that you need to tackle this kind of trash research project. Does anyone have any questions now? I'll stop sharing.
Hello, I have a
Yeah,
question.
sure.
My question is on the library database